Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Now, live from Chicago, the Hal Sparks radio program mega worldwide.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
Hal Sparks, actor, comedian, and multimedia personality.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hal Sparks.
All right, let's do this.
Well, Johnny, I'm torn this week. I'm torn between making the standard fare joke of, slow news week, nothing to talk about, or the a raging "I told you so" that's wind-up began in 2015.
If not 1980.
Right, sure. Well, granted, but let's. You and I only started voting in '88. In that election, so I can't. Again, I really only will. In many ways, I can talk in the abstract about politics that happened before I was born and the like, and I will always do them with sort of a intellectual, ethical, and philosophical grain of salt, because I had no part to play, nor did I grow up in the period where that happened. So I can speak to the wrongs that I believe existed before I was born, but I also know that if I was born in those times, my perception of them would be slightly different. And so, my awareness of that is ongoing. And so I hope it gives me more of an informed opinion about how things started and how you avoid them, and how positive, regular progress, incremental progress, is never to be dismissed. And you keep and hold every gain you have as if it's important, and you vote in accordance with maintaining and securing the rights that you have achieved and the goals that you have achieved so far. Now, I know if you watch a lot of TYT and Jimmy Dore and that crowd, they have moments of clarity, but the rest of the time, they're basically saying that all the wins that have been secured by, civil rights activists and women's rights activists and allies in the LGBT community and the LGBT community itself, those are that's old news. That's yesterday's news. We handled those things. Roe v. Wade basically left this fine, but there's contraception, gay marriage. Sure, the Democrats secured all of that stuff, but what have you done for me lately? Maybe I should just give this Donald Trump fella a try. I like the cut of his jib, and anything beats a woman running the joint. And
those emails.
But the emails. But the emails.
That was all I could think of when that ruling came down was those emails.
So the Supreme Court ruling that effectively not only overrules Roe v. Wade, but also Casey as well, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, is shocking enough. I mean, we knew this draft opinion had come out. There was some thought about, who was the person that leaked it, and would that person, was that a left-leaning person attempting to get them to change their mind through people pressuring the court once they knew this was about to come down, or was this a right-leaning person who was trying to gin up the vote and help during the primary season, which I find more logical, but we'll get to that later. So that, right-wingers would have something to motivate people to get to the polls going into this and the next election. Oh my gosh, Hal Vickery, bless you. I won't be able to make Sexy Liberal Chicago this year, so here's the price of my meet and grope ticket plus what I'd normally get. Oh, Hal Vickery, thank you so much for that support. I'm at this point, Hal Vickery, I'm going to have to come to your house and just do a private stand-up show. I just clear off.
I'm really glad how that sentence finished. I didn't know where we were headed.
Yes, you did, because I've given you a private stand-up show multiple times throughout our friendship.
Pretty much every day in high school.
That's right. Met. See, you know what I mean? Like, you're still working off your debt. That's why you do the show for free. No, bless you, Hal Vickery, and thank you for your ongoing support. And thanks everybody who listens to the show and has helped us grow over the years. It's very heartwarming. And especially in my current infuriated state. I got news for you, Democrats, progressives, liberals, however you want to label and bifurcate yourself out. If you even toy with the idea of believing in a woman's right to choose, or separation of church and state, or the ability of gay people to get married, or even because people have been throwing around whether Clarence Thomas thinks loving is next, and he could throw that one out so he doesn't have to divorce Ginny and he doesn't owe her a dime because, sorry, honey, the Supreme Court nullified our relationship. We never were married really legally. If he wants to go back and revisit all of those things. And if you even at any point have pretended to believe in those rights, and you're like, I don't know, but is Biden really, I don't know, do the Democrats really, are they ever doing anything? I mean, it's a ridiculous concept when you talk about the first infrastructure bill in 30 years, the first gun safety bill in 30 years, the ability to actually create bipartisan consensus in these situations, which is amazing and mind-blowing. And then the rescue package, which stabilized the country. And I mean, we were already headed into a recession in February of 2020 before COVID hit, and COVID masked over it for Trump's sake. He benefited ultimately from the existence of it. But if you think at this point that you can do a protest vote or a write-in candidate or a sideline vote because, you don't think enough is going on, it's madness enough that you take for granted all the gains Democrats have gotten over the years. It's crazy enough that you might have, been one of those voters that either didn't vote when Al Gore was running or voted the other way because, I don't know, he seems like a nicer guy and Gore's a little wooden, when it was the first time that we had a budget surplus in 60 years. That alone should have been a sign that stewardship under Democrats was better for your life in general. And had it gone on uninterrupted, only a psychopath thinks that Al Gore would have reacted to 9/11 if it would have even happened because he wouldn't have ignored the PDB. That's another, imagine that split in U.S. history. Imagine having someone like Al Gore or anyone, but, any Democrat that was currently running at the time as president during 9/11, there would have been a response, no question. More than likely, it would have been in line with what John Kerry was talking about, that it is a international law and order issue, not a geopolitical issue, because of where the people came from and where they were trained in Afghanistan. This is not about a war between countries, because Afghanistan isn't a country. It's 12 tribes slapped together in a country that borders only exist because other countries don't want to go any further. And Al Gore's response, while there would have been something, would never have been Iraq. Even if you go with the idea that we would have been in Afghanistan, the extent to which we would have been in Afghanistan would have been much smaller. And the extent that the idea that we would have gone into Iraq is lunacy.
Yeah.
And so just that alone, just going, flipping a coin, Gore v. Bush, that in and of itself is morally, from a progressive or liberal viewpoint, a dereliction of duty. You are giving away small activities that you can do that guarantee, by voting for someone who can actually be elected as opposed to, writing in a libertarian candidate because, the system, you guarantee that the course of human history and the course of action in the world goes a different way. And to let that go, especially when you know what the other side is, they've shown you where they want to go. The Project for a New American Century had a 7-country domino plan that was genuinely only interrupted because while Cheney was sort of running Bush's background, who's basically the Cheney presidency, he was too old to run for office up against Obama. And they put McCain in there. McCain was welcome to that. Remember, bomb, Iran, that stuff.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Right. Hilarious. And Obama comes in, and the only reason, I mean, they literally capsized the economy, but that wasn't enough of a lesson for anybody. Halfway through the Obama presidency, what have you done for me lately? And the numbers dim, and the Republicans see blood in the water, and they're like, yeah, I mean, Democrats like, a woman's right to choose. They like marriage equality, racial
People.
equality. They
They
like
like
human
people.
beings. You're right. They like human beings. They like things like an assault weapons ban or the Violence Against Women Act, which was originally drafted by the current president. But I mean, Hillary versus Trump. I mean, honestly,
Emails.
or emails, which was apparently in Trump's mind so effective. We got to take a break. That he tried to recreate that moment at every point during his reelection and throughout. Let's take a break. When we come back, I'm not going to let this go, guys. I've been accused of vote shaming in the past. Well, get used to the idea of understanding that if that's the way you intend to ever vote again, at least in the next 6 cycles in the United States, you should be ashamed. You should be ashamed. That's a shameful thing to do if you actually believe in the things you purport to believe in. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Welcome back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
So we were just discussing during the break, one of the statistics that bugs me every time we come around these kind of issues is that in what we would consider purple states, and even in some red states, statistically speaking, there are enough what you would call centrist or left-leaning Republicans, socially liberal, fiscally conservative Republicans who are all about business and the idea that if you could sell them on, minor tax breaks and it's fine, you're not anti-business. But if you go, gay people should be allowed to get married, they are pro-choice, that kind of stuff. If they had a candidate they could actually vote for that was a Democrat, a good portion of the time they would slip over and do that in a less insane time. But most of the time, the Democrats in those states don't recognize the volume of how many are there or are so quiet about it because they're in a state full of loud Republicans that they just keep it to themselves. And they don't recognize how many people, how many like-minded voters there are in that state. And by the way, those like-minded voters are kept from voting Democratic because of the radical messaging of the right. The idea that the left wants, they can't define what a woman is, and they don't care, and that they want to take all your kids to drag queen shows, and they want to take all your guns and install communism. That part. And so they search the webs for any sentence that can be perceived by a Democratic congressperson or or an actual statement from them out of 240 some Democrats and go, that's the Democratic Party. And that's how they chase those voters around in these smaller states. But the other way they win, the easiest part of their job, is demoralize Democratic voters who take for granted the wins the Democratic Party has delivered, just don't care anymore. Just go, as a matter of fact, part of the Democratic Party's issue with those voters has been sort of the recognition that you have to quietly allow these things to be charted so that you don't stir up the other side. You don't make the right-wing activists, you don't wake them up and make them take over. That was the big fear for a long time. So you just kind of go, we're going to do this, but we're not going to just beat our chest everywhere we go. And so there was a lack of using the bully pulpit in one way to push the positivity of these things, but also touting these wins after they're done. You just go back to living. Everybody's got the right to gay marriage right now. We're not going to hammer people who are against it. We're just going to hope that they live and let live. And that works some of the time until in the timeline I was mentioning before the break, we get to Clinton versus Trump. And there was an active, and I would argue still ongoing, active move on the, specifically the progressive wing, because of slights felt against Bernie Sanders, which, by the way, didn't happen. I'm just going to put that out there. He was not screwed by the Democratic Party. He's an independent who used the Democratic Party to run, and then he left and went back to being an independent, and then a few years later did the exact same thing again. That's not how it works. You don't get to just kind of jump in and use the Democratic Party as a super PAC every 4 years and then expect them to take you as seriously as people who are committed to the platform of the Democratic Party for years and years and years and years. And yes, it may be your only option, but then maybe run in Vermont as a Democrat and be recognized as the most left-leaning member of the Democratic Party instead of sort of an ideological carpetbagger every 4 years, and then get confused when people who have been running as Democrats and trying to help other Democrats get elected aren't favorable to just letting you take the joint over. Because the Republicans let that happen with Donald Trump, and look how well that worked out. The other difference is that statistically across the country, as popular as some of the ideas that Bernie himself wants, and most of the time the popularity is around the, again, 70% of people poll that they support Medicare for all. Those same people also, according to the same polling, don't know that Medicare for all means the elimination of private security or insurance. It means getting rid of it. When you tell them it does, which it would, the support drops to almost 30%. However, single payer, which everybody blames there were 12 blue dogs that kept that out of, that had big insurance states, kept that out of the ACA. They were the turning point in those votes. That specific element of having a single payer system that competes with private insurance. So you have a choice, just like you have public school, private school. You have cops and you have private security. You have state universities and you have private universities. We understand that in the United States. That's something people can wrap their heads around. Polls at 90%. The Biden-Clinton idea of how to move this forward. And by the way, that's your way of eventually getting to a state-run system in the United States without having to have a war bomb you back to the Stone Age like the Brits did. The NIH, the NHS, the National Health Service in England, largely started because the country had been leveled. It wasn't something that
literally
they didn't make a political shift instantly. They had nothing. The hospitals were bombed. They had to, it was like their own internal Marshall Plan to rebuild healthcare in the country because it was gone. So they started from scratch with a no functioning system. I mean, they were triaging people in tents where buildings used to be. If you're not in that situation, get used to the idea that the incremental change is your pathway. And the British system, would have had, over time, it's been incrementally improved upon since that initial system. Because everything you create needs tweaks. It needs constant gardening. You weed it and you fertilize it and you water it. That's a constant process. That's what responsible governance is. And when you have a situation where you have the opportunity to get a win on the board, you take it. And if, in our case currently right now, with 48, and I don't mean minus Manchin and Sinema. Every time I say this, people go, yeah, because Manchin and Sinema aren't real Democrats. I mean 48 elected Democrats. We have 48. The American voting populace, the voters of America, have decided that 48 Democrats, 2 independents, and 50 Republicans elected in office are the balance that they chose. And that wasn't just Republicans seizing back space. That was Democrats and Democratic-leaning voters, and arguably the the slacktivist class ceding territory, saying I'm so upset about if I can't get everything, nobody gets anything, therefore let them have it. And what we saw this week, and what we and there was sort of a blessing in the awful this week, is that they were so emboldened that Clarence Thomas literally wrote in his opinion that all due process arguments that have been previously put forward that are on the same basis as Roe v. Wade are all up for grabs.
Neat. That's so cool.
Yep. And acting like, well, the Democrats and the Republicans are two legs in the same pair of pants. They're, it's a uniparty system. There's no real choice in America. When you look at who Biden has put on the Supreme Court, when you look at who Obama has put on the Supreme Court, and when you look at who Trump has put on the Supreme Court, and you look at who Bush put on the Supreme Court, and they intend to going forward, there is no situation where the next Republican president, be it Trump or DeSantis, Trump's not going to run, but DeSantis or somebody of his ilk, that the next one, even if they run as a more moderating voice than Trump, puts someone less conservative than Amy Coney Barrett on the court. She is now the gold standard, so much so that Clarence Thomas, when he finally speaks, after years of silence and standing in Scalia's shadow and being just kind of like a rubber stamp, when he
years
finally,
and years, decades.
Yes, right. When he finally lets his freak flag fly, he's arguing stuff she wouldn't have had the guts to bring up even when she was an activist before she was on the list to be on the Supreme Court. There is no version of the future where, until the Republican Party are a whisper of who they used to be, a sideline, minuscule minority party of lunatics that only charts on school boards and the occasional mayor, where there is no future where that until that happens, where Democratic voters or Democratic-leaning voters or progressive or liberals can afford to not vote for the Democrat that's capable of winning in the race. Period. End of story. You have to, because we have taken too many wins for granted. That was the lesson this week. That we as Democratic voters, it's not Obama's fault. It's not Al Gore's fault for being too wooden. It's our fault. We ceded that territory by having a privileged view of our position and taking the civil rights wins that the Democrats are almost solely responsible for creating and saying, that was 5 minutes ago. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega, worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Vote.org, folks. Share that link and share it often. Vote.org. Register and make sure you're registered and make sure your friends are registered. We'll be back.
They went a little crazy with it, and I appreciate it.
It's
now
true.
Let's get back with House Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Welcome back. Johnny Million is restarting his setup at home. He'll be joining us in just a second. He was a little blurry, and I have to say our chat room likes to see him in crisp, fine detail. They like the cut of his jib. I'm just saying. One of the things our chat room is alive with this conversation, of course, and there's all kinds of conversations that we're hearing from pack the court to the idea that there needs to be that alone, that primary one. There's a myriad of solutions. People are looking for an immediate one. And it's frustrating to me because my reaction is the only reason you are like killing the filibuster. The only reason you are clamoring for a radical change to the Supreme Court and its makeup right now is because of the abdication of responsibility that occurred in 2016. Had we taken seriously when Donald Trump said there has to be some kind of punishment for the woman. He said that during the 2016 election cycle in May of 2016, during the Republican primaries. He said it. Chris Matthews asked him again and again, does that mean there has to be a punishment for the woman? He said, yes. And a huge, an enormous number of people who at parties call themselves feminists or gay rights supporters, progressive, a genuinely significant number of those people said, you know what? I'd rather have him pick who's on the who fills the seat, RBG's seat, than her. A statistically and election-changing significant number of people decided that it was at best a coin flip, and at worst it was better if he did it because it would collapse the system. That was the Susan Sarandon argument, which our dear friends at TYT sold for months until a couple of months before the election when it looked like, oh my gosh, there's a chance this guy could win, and started backpedaling. And their own viewers turned on them because you can't tell people someone's a warmongering danger to society and will destroy us all and is the most evil baby-eating monster in the world. And then 6 weeks before go, you know that guy you see on TV? She's better than him. Doesn't work. And it's what happens when you are serious about the long-term impacts of positive, of negative changes in the judiciary and who you let in charge of your country. That, to me, is one of the most infuriating aspects of the 2016 cycle and what's going on this week. Because this die was cast then. And again, we can blame Republicans for this. We can even blame, blue dogs who are no longer in office, and we can blame, variance in, politically, Jimmy Carter for being boring, or Bill Clinton for terming out, or Al Gore for being wooden, or Obama for not doing enough. Which, by the way, is code the Republicans take as you guys never really liked him. That it was just about electing a black man and you didn't care about what he was trying to accomplish, including the ACA. It's why they felt comfortable attacking it. When they would do polling about the ACA, when it was unpopular, it is now popular. It is now in the positive. When they would do polling about that, and it trended negative, half the negative was people who wished it had gone further but weren't against it. Half of the people, there's Johnny, he's back with us, and he's bright and shiny, and we see him. We can see the glint off his dome. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Is it a little better?
Yeah, it's way better. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not as good as mine, but then, yeah. I spend all day tweaking my camera sometimes, so I'm a maniac. A vain maniac, I might add. Huh?
Are we on the air?
Oh, yes, we are. We're live and running. So I was just making the point that when voters decided that the ACA should have gone further, and when they were polled about it, said, do you approve of the ACA? Instead of saying, yes, but, the polls that were there, do you approve of the ACA? A lot of the people who said no were saying no because they wanted more. They didn't think it went far enough, which is very different from being against its existence. But that didn't matter. It put it underwater because people didn't go, yes, I'm supportive of it. I'm fighting for more. And when the poll doesn't let you say why you don't approve of it, and that because it's because you think it should go further, checking no is a signal to the Republicans that not only either one or the other, either you are on their side. See, even liberals and progressives don't like this bill, or that you just don't care enough to fight for the rest of it. And that's exactly what happened. And it muted Obama's numbers in the second round. It built this storyline that, Obama wasn't that great, and he didn't, sure, he got 24 million people insurance, and he kept kids on their insurance till they were 27, which saved innumerable lives and bankruptcies and the like. But it wasn't enough, so the hell with him. Let's give Donald Trump a try. A man who was on tape on Access Hollywood admitting to repeated sexual assault and a cavalier attitude towards it, where he thought he had the right to do it to any woman he met that he felt like touching. He could just do it. And people were like, all right, that guy. Hillary Clinton was to the left of Bernie Sanders on guns. She was, for all practical purposes, in the primary and everything. And this has to do with the fact that Bernie's an independent who comes from a relatively rural state. Vermont has a lot of woods and a much friendlier gun culture than New York, where people are elbow to elbow and having some idiot at Sbarro drop his handgun and shoot you through the kneecap because he feels, afraid that he won't be able to get his fry order taken seriously unless he's waving a peace, is a concern. And so there are different attitudes in different parts of the country. And so I think Bernie, she has an F and Bernie has a D minus, like that kind of thing. But the choices Hillary Clinton would have made about these kind of issues, you have to recognize, and not like Bernie would have made any huge difference in this, but like he would have been less so,
right,
that much. But she was, obviously and forthright about her desire to do certain kinds of gun safety measures. That was, 1,600 mass shootings ago. How many lives would have been saved if the number of people who believe in comprehensive background, universal background checks and an assault weapons ban and all those things, vast majority of people, huge majority of people, had voted that way for real instead of flipping a coin and just going, we've seen what the Democrats do. Let's see what the Republicans can do. There's really no difference. It's really just a personality fight. I don't like Al Gore. I think George Bush seems more colloquial, and his dad wasn't too terrible because he was drummed out in one term. There, and as a Hillary voter, because I'm, in 2016, because I am sane and would like the world to be here for my grandchildren and my grandchildren's grandchildren. When I was at Politico, and a well-known progressive talker who was also there found out that I was supporting Hillary in the election because I thought she had a real chance of getting elected, and she did indeed win the popular vote. This person refused to talk to me the rest of the time we're there. By the way, they were talking to Ann Coulter. They were talking to Glenn Beck. They were talking to Robert Davi, who was there as a Trump supporter, chit-chatting away. But because I was just frankly saying I was going to, I would vote for the nominee, whoever it was on the Democratic Party. Bernie had won the nomination hands down. No question. Yeah, of course. But the very fact that they found out this person who's, by the way, there's a clip of this person being shared all over the internet, being very angry about the ruling this week, and how somehow, this is Christianity is to blame, right? That's people who have Twitter will know what I'm talking about. That very person thought it was worse that I was supporting Clinton than someone else was supporting Trump, that I was more of an enemy. And I don't mean just because you're going to ruin it for us, but genuinely, almost Q-level hatred, where, Hillary's not just a politician that you don't think goes far enough. She was a baby eater, probably in a secret lesbian relationship, and her husband,
That's how many times did you and I talk about that, Hal?
Well, and you never convinced me.
I've got the videotapes.
I'm sorry, but you doodling what you think it would look like on the corner of a notebook, and then creating
that's not videotape?
Creating a flip book of cartoon is not going to. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. Anyways, we got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. This is the position we find ourselves in, and this is the position that Clarence Thomas has warned us.
Mm-hmm.
The writing is on the wall. There is no, both-siderism. Both-siderism is dead.
That kills me.
And anybody who sells it is selling for the Clarence Thomas argument, for Donald Trump's next presidency, for Matt Gaetz, for MTG. Period. End of story. It's crazy. Or they simply don't care and they make a living arguing. So they want arguments to be the word of the day, so that as long as people are freaking out, they'll always have a buck to be made. We'll be back. I know I'm only on one day a week. I get it. I'm going to have to jump on GarageBand and start sawing something together. This is the Hal Sparks Show. Wow. And a guitar note, and then progressive, and all. Yeah, it's going to be good.
Hey, Hal, did you mean something like this?
This is the Hal Sparks Show. Wow. And a guitar note, and then progressive, and all. Yeah, it's going to be good.
The Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Welcome back. It's there's been a lot of issues, I suppose, and we'll get into some of the stuff that's happening with Putin and Russia. I think Philip Bittner's going to be joining us from Ukraine in the next hour. But not taking threats seriously because you enjoy a level of comfort, or you are busied by discomfort that on a scale, compared to, the millions that are going to be starving to death because Russia is blowing up grain silos and stealing grain and letting it putrefy on purpose. It's a different chart. It just is. I'm not saying your problems aren't real. I'm just saying on a scale, they have to be taken in context, in that reality. It's like the Republicans who are filming empty shelves at grocery stores, and then it's one segment where one particular product, there's been a run on it, and then you back up and the shelves are just stacked with food, and everything's on sale right now because the stores have too much inventory, so they're cutting prices. And Powell's, the Fed's going to go, look, we brought prices down. No, you didn't. They bought too much stuff and they're doing sales. That's different. It's, that's another conversation for another time. But the reality is what, what's the biggest problem I see in the conversation amongst Democrats going into the fall, besides the fact that a good portion of liberal and progressive allies of the Democratic Party, what would be like progressive independents or whatever that group is, take wholly for granted all the civil rights gains that the Democrats have been soldiering on for decades. all the economic gains that the Democrats have been soldiering, like reinforcing unions. I mean, literally, Biden is running on being the most union-friendly president in the last 80 years. And we've seen more union progress from Amazon to Starbucks to, to just the general support of our regular unions, United Auto Workers, all these groups, more support for them and more political clout being recognized from them than we've seen in years. But what have you done for me lately? First bipartisan gun legislation passed in 30 years. The Violence Against Women Act had to be renewed after we got 48 votes in the Senate because we needed that tipping point. We needed the ability to have that balance point to get enough Republicans on board just to do something that had been law since the 90s. But then look at who that party is and is willing to become. Because why would you worry about the Violence Against Women Act when you're actively collaborating in violence against women by not caring if they die from an ectopic pregnancy or rape and incest? If you don't care about that area, why would I? Of course, you're not going to pass the Violence Against Women Act. We think they're going to codify the ERA ever? Democrats want to do it, almost to the person, right? Democrats, have been actively moving towards even the goals of the ERA, even without its ratification, since it was crafted in the 70s. And Republicans have been working against it. So much so that their own party, when they put up Sarah Palin, she had a 70% likability rating amongst Republicans and a 20% electability rating. We like ladies. They just shouldn't run anything.
What kills me right now is the argument the both sides argument where they say Democrats are equally as responsible because they didn't codify this into law when they had the chance.
Well,
here's me bonkers.
Well, first of all, we haven't had in that time more than 58 Democrats. We never crossed the 60 threshold, which would have protected us against a pro-life, hyper-conservative being able to filibuster it. The other thing is that we operated as, in many ways, again, and as this is settled law. And it became a point of every time somebody sits in front of the Judiciary Committee to end up on the SCOTUS, this was part of the conversation. Do you believe it's settled law? Yeah, I do.
I'd say yes, and you can't tell that I'm lying.
That's right. And by the time you do, it's too late. Yeah. Now, and this is the thing. This is the difference about the Trump presidency versus just the long game of the Republicans. He was able to make up for lost time, because if they had to do this over time, if they had somebody if they had put up if Clarence Thomas hadn't kept his mouth shut all this time, and they had put in Kavanaugh or somebody like them during Bush, and to chip away at this point, that were really the hardliners about this, their writings around this, unless they were effectively really being undercover about this, if they wrote their genuine political opinions about these things, they would have written something like Clarence Thomas wrote like this years ago. They would have written it in the early 2000s. Scalia, by the way, arguably is the person who kept them from writing it to keep them on path so that they wouldn't sort of be called out for this. But the Trump presidency in 4 years added 3 judges, all of whom lied. And the expectation is, well, they're yes, we don't like him, and yes, but we can't leave the Supreme Court. We're not going to do what Mitch McConnell did. We're going to play fair because you need a functioning government because we actually care. Democrats actually care about the ramifications of this. It's really easy. If you're Vladimir Putin, you don't have to care if people starve to death. You don't.
Nope.
Everybody else has to play on sort of a level playing field because you're trying to save as many innocent lives as you can, even in context of war. But if you're on the other side and you don't care, you know, all's fair in love and war, or, you know, or hate and violence. And the fact that Donald Trump was put in a position where he was able to replace 3 in succession, and none of them had to give a ruling over the course of like 6 or 8 years that would have cued people to like, uh-oh, here it comes. It kept those triggers from being known until it was too late. Effectively, it was a snap trap. And yeah, here's Philip Ittner joining us. He'll join us at the top of the next hour. And this goes towards what women's rights were on the ballot in 2016. And a significant number of Democratic-leaning independents, of radical progressives, and malaised, laissez-faire Democratic voters shrugged off women's rights. He told you what he was going to do. He in the Access Hollywood tape and the Chris Matthews interview, Donald Trump told you his standard for women's rights in the world. And the response was, I'll show him by not voting for that woman. That was the response. And again, that's why I put it 100% on us. That's on us. It's okay, fool me once, won't get fooled again. It's okay to go, we thought they were playing fair for a period of time. That illusion is stripped away. When Donald Trump is celebrating the Matt Gaetz and the MTGs and the Lauren Boeberts of his party and viewing the John Kasichs as an enemy and trying to broom out anybody who voted for him, will vote for him again more than likely, but didn't defend his big lie or voted against him in the impeachment because they thought it was a bridge too far. He's told you who he is. And this week, Clarence Thomas told you the future of the Republican judiciary choices on federal benches, on the appeals courts, and all the way up to the Supreme Court, because it's not about just SCOTUS. Clarence Thomas has told you this. Contraception, same-sex relationships, which means being fired for being gay, has to be back on the table, according to Clarence Thomas. And they have the means to do it. And if they get another inch, they're going to take it. And if you give them that inch, you are signing off on those changes. You're saying, I agree. Same-sex marriage, gone. Relationships, gone. Contraception, gone. Women's right to choose, gone. And you're fine with that. I'm not. I hope you're not. Vote.org. We'll be back after the news with our dear friend Philip Ittner, who will be talking to us from Ukraine, where Operation Boomerang of the Russians is in full effect. It's fascinating. I'll tell you about it in a second.
Pew, pew.
Pew, pew.